Don't forget that you're listening to Nightmare. Many stories on this channel begin with apologies, with trembling voices recalling the past. And I understand why. When you tell something that seems impossible, that sounds ridiculous, the fear isn't only in the memory, it's in the listener's reaction. I've been ridiculed before, even by my own parents and siblings. They called me crazy without even really hearing me out. But today, I don't care. I need to tell this. It happened in the house my family bought in California, near the sea. A house that seemed peaceful on the outside, but chilled me to the bone. I never felt at home there. I only lived there for a short time before leaving for college, and yet something about that place stayed with me. I always felt like I wasn't alone, like something was watching me, angry with me. As if stepping into that house was a silent crime I was paying for without knowing it. That house had a history, and not a happy one. It had belonged to an elderly couple who died there. What surprised us most when we arrived was a collection of little devil masks hanging on one wall. Instead of throwing them out, my parents, for some strange reason, decided to keep them. From then on, every time I passed through that room, I felt something. Heavy, dense, as if the masks weren't just decorations, but faces witnessing something more. Something trapped in their frozen expressions. In the short time I lived there, the discomfort was constant. It was like when your parents are angry with you and you try to avoid running into them. That's how every corner felt. An invisible resentment, a lingering energy. At the time, I thought it was just nerves about leaving home. Now I know they were warnings. I returned to the house sometime later for my sister's birthday. That night, I decided to stay over because I wasn't feeling well. My parents went to bed early. I stayed up watching TV. Suddenly, the screen went black. I heard someone place the remote behind me. I assumed it was my mother, but then, a woman's voice I had never heard before whispered with chilling clarity, "Leave this place." I felt a shiver that froze my entire body. I didn't dare turn around. I only heard footsteps walking away toward the dining room. I peeked over the couch and saw a dark shape crouched in the corner. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It didn't shine. It was pure shadow. I ran, grabbed my keys, and left without saying goodbye. The next morning, I lied. I said I just wasn't feeling well. But inside, the fear was still pounding. Almost a year passed before I returned. I had managed to bury that memory, convincing myself it was just my imagination. It was December, and everyone had stepped out for a while. I was alone, had just come out of the shower, and noticed a silence so thick it felt unreal. I walked down the hallway and something made me stop. I saw, or thought I saw, a figure at the far end, right where the hallway turns toward the stairs. Someone was watching me. It was one of the devil masks, but it wasn't hanging. It was floating. Behind it stood an old woman, emaciated, her skin like aged paper, bald in patches. The image was as quick as it was brutal. The mask slid behind the wall, slowly, as if it knew I had seen it. I called my mother immediately. She said they were just coming back from the store. I felt a cold sweat run down my spine. What I had seen had been there while I was alone, waiting for me. When they arrived, I tried to tell them what I saw. I said someone had moved one of the masks. My mother just laughed. That nervous laugh that's worse than silence. My father, from the kitchen, asked who had touched it. When I turned my head, I saw him holding it. The same mask. the same one I had seen floating in the hallway seconds earlier. He hung it back in its place as if nothing had happened. I said nothing more. It was in that moment I understood the most terrifying part of all, that whatever lives in that house doesn't need to move in plain sight to invade you. It does it through the invisible, the unspoken, in the way your own parents ignore your fears. I realized for the first time that the most dangerous thing wasn't the entity. It was the fact that no one would ever believe me. Since my sister's accident, no one used the living room the same way again. Something in the house had changed, as if the mask, or whatever was using it, had grown bolder, more present. I tried to go on with my life, but at night, when I closed my eyes, I felt that same presence. Sometimes it wasn't just one, but several. Shadows slipping under doors, muffled footsteps on the hallway's wooden floor, whispers that stopped just before forming a word. I started sleeping with music or white noise, trying to drown out the sounds that seemed to rise from the house itself. My parents, although they wouldn't admit it, were different too. They locked themselves in before sunset and stopped decorating the living room, as if avoiding it was their way of not invoking whatever had once lived in the walls. One night, I woke up for no apparent reason. It was almost 3 a.m. There was no sound, but something pulled me out of my room. The house was dark, but I walked toward the living room anyway. As soon as I stepped onto the rug, the temperature dropped abruptly. The air smelled of old dampness, of stale confinement, and something else, like rusted metal. There, right in front of me, was a hunched figure. It had no face, just one of the missing masks. Its head trembled slowly, as if moaning or repeating something in a very low voice. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move or scream. And then, just like when it all began, I heard that same female voice, dry, rasping, say again, "Get out of here." But this time, she said it closer, too close, like she was right next to my ear. I ran without looking back, locked myself in my room, and didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I went downstairs carefully, hoping it had all been a dream, but something still felt wrong. The house had that cemetery atmosphere, like it had been abandoned for years, even though we all still lived there. I found one of the masks lying broken in half on the dining room floor, as if someone had thrown it violently. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe they chose not to. That's when I realized what lived in that house wasn't tied to a physical object like I had thought. The masks were just a channel, a way to manifest, but not the origin. And that was the most terrifying part, because even if all the masks were gone, the entity was still there, with the same intensity, waiting, demanding something we still didn't understand. From that day on, I started researching the previous owners. It was hard to find information, but an old neighbor told me about the elderly couple who used to live there. Apparently, the wife lost her mind after her husband died and refused to leave the house. People said she performed rituals, that she spoke to things no one else could see. Some claimed they saw her placing candles and objects in front of the masks. The neighbor also told me something even more disturbing. The house had been empty for years before my parents bought it, because no one wanted to live there. There had always been strange activity, shadows in the windows, noises from inside. It turns out we weren't the first to feel haunted by something in that room. We were just the latest in a long list of tenants ignored by history. After hearing all that, something changed in me. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I started writing down everything that had happened to me, everything I remembered since I first heard the voice. It was a kind of therapy, but also a warning. One night, I decided to leave a camera recording in the living room. When I checked the footage the next morning, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. At exactly 3:12 a.m., a figure emerged from the darkness, walked slowly toward the couch, stood still, and then turned its head straight toward the camera. It had no eyes, just a cracked mask covered in dark stains. The camera shut off seconds later. I couldn't stay there anymore. I spoke to my parents. I told them I was leaving, that I couldn't keep facing something that clearly didn't want us in its territory. Today I write this from somewhere else, far from that house, but not entirely safe. Sometimes, in the early hours, I hear footsteps in the hallway, even though I live alone. Or I catch glimpses of figures in the corner of my eye that vanish when I turn my head. I don't know if whatever was in that house stayed behind, or if somehow it followed me. Maybe sharing this story won't change anything. Maybe no one will believe me. But if you ever find yourself in a house with masks hanging on the walls, with an energy you can't explain and a silence that feels heavy, listen to your instincts. If you feel like someone is watching you from a corner, don't ignore it. And if you ever hear a voice whispering for you to leave, listen to it. Do it before it's too late.